it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making another scene card combining a whole bunch of Lawn Fawn sets, including Wild for You, Critters on the Savannah, Critters in the Jungle, A Bug Deal, Butterfly Kisses, and You Are Sublime. So I've stamped my images out in Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink on 2 panels of Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock. I've got my critters on one and my leaves on the other. I'm going to do my critters first, and I am coloring with my Copic markers. So I'm starting with my giraffe, and for him I picked Y11, Y13, and Y15. Now if you watched my recent favorite Copic combos for jungle critters, I did use a different combo for the giraffe in that video. It was a little bit more of a brown toned yellow, and so it was a little more realistic. Today's video, I'm actually trying to make a card for kids, so I'm using some brighter colors and even some unexpected colors in certain areas, just to make things a little bit more fun and kid-friendly. So that's why I chose to go with these much brighter, pure yellows. So I'm using that Y15 to lay in my shadows on the edges of the giraffe's body, any place that I feel that they should go, and I blended that out with the Y13 and filled in the rest with the Y11 as my highlight shade. I'm also going to color in the little beaks of my 2 birds with that Y15. And then I'm going to move on to the brown spots for my giraffe. For those, I'm using E33, E35, and E37. I'm also going to use those on his hooves and his ossicones, which are the antler type things on top of a giraffe's head, in case you weren't aware, and his tail as well. So I'm starting with that E37, my darkest shade, and adding a bit of shadow on each of those areas, blending out with the E35, and then filling in with the E33. And I apologize for that subtle shift that the camera keeps doing. My husband recently built me a new wooden tripod. My old one was falling apart, and it must have been somehow resting on my mat or squeezing the edges of my mat. So every time I set my arm down on the mat, it made the tripod rock, I guess. I didn't realize that was happening until I was watching this video back, but hopefully I'll get that figured out before the next video. But anyway, moving on to my elephant, and here is where I'm starting with some of these unexpected colors. Rather than doing my elephant in gray, I decided to go with a light aqua, again just for something fun and different, and I picked BG quadruple 0, BG triple 0, and BG01. So I'm using that BG01 to lay in my shadows first, and just drawing out those little lines like on the top of the trunk, and then using the BG triple 0 to blend that out. And I feel like blue is not too far of a stretch for an elephant, even though elephants are not really blue in real life. You know, grays can be blue toned, and so it's not too far, you know, it's makes a little bit more sense than perhaps a green or an orange would. So rather than choosing a color that would be like totally outside the realm of possibility, I just took a side step to a color family that is kind of like related to what you would normally expect for an elephant. And I think that's a good tip for doing these kind of kid cards where you're just doing something that is still believable, but also kind of inspiring the imagination. Another tip for doing these kind of more fanciful cards with the unexpected colors is not to do all of the critters that way. The more critters you do that way, the more childlike the card is going to turn out. So in this case, I actually think this end result card would work for adults as well, especially adults that have a more whimsical nature. I would love to receive a card like this. It wouldn't bother me in the slightest, and I wouldn't feel like it was too childlike because I just have that kind of, imaginative nature myself. But I did the giraffe in yellow tones, so that one was typical. Yes, I chose brighter yellows than I would normally do, but it still, reads as a straight up giraffe. And now I'm doing my alligator or crocodile is the same. I'm doing just greens. I picked YG61, YG63, and YG67 for him. So he's going to be, absolutely more realistic in tone. And I just put my darker colors on the bottom for him and then blended toward the top. I did do a second layer on him off screen. And then once that dried, I went back in with that YG67 and added a bit of dot detail to him to kind of represent his scaly texture. I'll also do a few dots with that YG63. And then I'll take the YG67 and color in all of his little bony plates across his back. So I've done 2 critters so far, more realistic looking, and now I'm going to do another that is a bit more fantastical. I'm going to replace all of the black stripes on my zebra with these kind of indigo blue stripes. So instead of using a warm gray for the white areas, I'm actually going to use the lightest in this color family, which is the B60. So I'm laying in some shadows on the edges of his body and the underside of his hind leg there. Any place that I feel like the shadow should go. I'm just using that one shade so it'll be subtle, and the rest of him will be bright white so he doesn't look like a totally purple giraffe. He's just, got that little bit of shading on his white areas. And then for his mane, tail, and hooves, I'm going to use B66, B69, and B79. So I'm starting with the B79 as the darkest, and then moving to the B69 for the mid-tone, and then filling any white areas on those places with the B66. For the rest of his stripes, I wanted them to be just a shade lighter than those areas. So I'm going to take away the B79 and add in the B63. So I'll use those 3 shades for the stripes. And again, I'm starting with my darkest one, the B69, and just adding a little shading on the bottom side of each of those stripes. And then I'll take the B66 and begin to blend that out, and then fill in with the B63. And again, I feel like this isn't too far of a stretch for a zebra. Sometimes black can be so black that it looks blue. So it's more of just, like a subtle shift into a more fantastical color family. It's not as mind-boggling as red stripes would be. For my lion, once again, I'm going back to a typical color palette. I am using some more brownish yellows for him, just so he doesn't look the same as the zebra. I wanted each of the critters to be distinct and in their own color palette. So I'm using YR20, YR21, and YR23 for his body. And I started with the YR23. On his face, I'm blending toward the center since he is facing forward. I want that highlight to be on the area that would be protruding the most and catching the most sun, which would be his nose. And then for his lower body, I wanted it to be on his front feet since those are the most outstretched part of his body down there, and again would be getting the most sun. Then for his mane and tail, I'm going to use E25, E27, and E29. So I'm starting with that E29. I just had to move my marker caps because they were in my way. And then I'm going to just add that bit of shading right around his face, and then begin to blend that out with the E27, which is my midtone. And I'm just saving a little bit of room on the edge of each kind of chunk of hair there for the highlight, which will be the E25. So I'll just finish coloring him in. So in the end, I really only have 2 critters in this whole scene that have the non-traditional color palette. So I personally think it will work for kids or adults, but you guys can let me know down in the comments what you think about that. So I am moving on to my birds now, and I did want a pop of red on this card, so I'm doing them both in R24, R29, and R39, and since they're super small, I'm just going to color them both at once. So I use the R39 on the undersides of their bellies, and then I'm blending up toward their heads with the R29, and then filling in the head with the R24. And I really love this combo. I think it looks just kind of velvety and beautiful. And then I'm going to do my butterflies in orange. I really love the rainbow color palette, so I decided to kind of shift in and fill in the couple of color families that were missing with the red and the orange, and that kind of completes the whole rainbow in this little scene here. So I used YR04, YR07, and YR09 for these butterflies, so they could kind of like represent monarch butterflies or something like that. Not too far outside the realm of normal. And then I'm going to use my R11 and R20. I'm going to color in the lion's nose with the R20, and then I'm going to do the insides of a couple of these critters' ears with these 2 shades as well. I'll do the giraffe, the elephant, and the zebra. And then I'm going to give all of my critters some rosy cheeks, with the exception of the birds, because they were already dark red and it would have been pretty difficult to get it to show up on there. So I just blended out the edge of the R20 with the R11 for the cheeks, and then also the insides of the ears. And that is going to complete this panel. So I'm going to switch to the one with the leaves now. And I'm going to breeze through this one a lot faster because the critters were kind of the main focus. I'm basically just going to do one of each type of leaf and then skip over the coloring of the others so you can kind of see what I'm doing. So I'm using these clouds from Butterfly Kisses to be little bushes. I've got this large one that I'm working on, and then there's a small one beside it and another small one up toward the top right under the marker caps. So I'm just making little bushes out of them using YG21, YG23, and YG25. And I did 2 layers of all of these off screen. Then I'm moving on to these grasses, and I'm using YG11, YG13, and YG17 for these. These are from You Are Sublime, so they're supposed to be like seagrasses, but in the jungle there's all kinds of different foliage as well, so I thought those would work nicely. The next group of leaves, I'm going to be using G21, G24, and G28. I really was putting all of my greens to work on this card today because I wanted all of my leaves to look a little bit different, so it would just give it that really full tropical feel. So for these, I put the darkest in the center and then at the bottom of each section, and then blend it out with the midtone and then the highlight. And then I wanted to have something that was more of a blue-green, like maybe like a blue spruce type color. So I'm going to do that for these other leaves here. These are from A Bug Deal. And I used BG72, BG75, BG78, and then BG99, which has a little bit more of almost an olive green tone to it, so it really lent that greenish cast, especially along that veining. I did want to have at least one more unusual colored plant, and I decided to go with some warmer toned purples to kind of finish out that rainbow color palette. So I did that on these viney looking plants that are also from You Are Sublime. I used V04 and V09 for those, colored in solid with the V04, and then added a little dot of the V09 at the base of each leaf. And then for this last plant, I went with some more olivey greens. I chose G40, G94, and G99. So I'm adding that G99 down the center of each leaf, and then also where they join in the middle to kind of make it look nice and dark and deep there where they're kind of clustered together. And then blending that out with the G94. And then I'm going to finish with that G40, which is a much lighter shade. So I do have to work over the edge of that G94 to get it to blend. And then when I do my second layer off screen, it's going to smooth that blend out even more. So once I have finished with this last plant, we have finished the coloring. So I will trim all of these images out with their matching dies. The pattern paper that I'm using today is from the Spiffy Speckles collection, and I use the Sunburst backdrop to die cut one out of green on green speckle and one out of green on white speckle. And I'm going to take the center of the green on green and combine that with the green on white speckle. So I'm going to take a sentiment from Magic Messages and I'm going to stamp that in the center of that little circle, and I'm using the one that says happy birthday because I always need birthday cards. I just never seem to have enough on hand. So anyway, I did have to tape that down to hold it in place because the magnet was covering up too much no matter how I placed it. So then I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using a piece of Lawn Fawn's sticky note cardstock and stamping in sunflower ink. I've really been liking this combo lately. It just makes it seem really sunny and springy. And I'm using the little elephant from Wild For You and the butterfly and another sentiment from Magic Messages that says, "You make me smile." I'm going to glue my Sunburst backdrop piece right to the front of my card base. That is a standard A2 size card, so it's 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall. And then the center portion with the sentiment, I'm going to pop up on some foam tape just to give it a bit of lift. Then I'll bring in all of my images and I'm going to start with the giraffe. I wanted to start with the critters that were going to be tallest on the card. So I'm going to glue him over on the left hand side, kind of tucked a little bit back behind that sentiment. And then the elephant is going to be overlapping that sentiment just a bit. I decided to pop him up on some foam tape so that he could layer in front of that and be kind of level. And now, because I like to have things balanced, I'm going to work on the right hand side before I get any further. And this time my zebra's hooves are also going to overlap that sentiment. So I'm going to pop him up on some foam tape as well. In fact, I end up popping almost every single image except for a few of the leaves up on foam tape because I just really liked the way that it gave everything just that much more dimension on the scene. Next is the lion, and he is going to go over on the right, kind of balancing out the elephant. And then I'm going to have the alligator or crocodile, whatever you want him to be, down in the center on the bottom. And once those 5 main critters are situated where I want them, I'm going to start filling in the rest of the space with all of these leaves and just trying to make everything look like a lush jungle scene. So this part is always just a bit of trial and error for me, just testing things out, laying them out in place first and seeing if I like how that looks before adding them either with the foam tape or the liquid glue so that they're on there, permanently. I just like to kind of make sure that I have things where I want them and that it's looking right before I commit to it. Another thing that I made sure to do was to cover up, or at least partially cover up, each of the critters' feet. And that was just to make them look a little bit more grounded into the scene, so that it looks like they're actually standing amongst the foliage. And then also just kind of fill in the space behind them as well to make everything look really lush and thick and overgrown, just like I mentioned. One of the tricky parts was trying to make sure that none of the leaves overlapped the edge of the card, because if they did, they would get bent when you stuck them in an envelope. So I tried to, at least as close as possible, stay within the parameters of the edges of the card. Another thing I did was to make sure that no two leaves that were the same were right up next to each other. I wanted everything to look like there was just so much variety growing in this jungle scene. So everything had, a different color and a different style leaf next to it. No two leaves that looked the same were right up next to each other. I also tried to make sure that some of the foliage even went behind the giraffe. That was a little bit tricky because I had adhered him flat to the card with that liquid glue quite a while ago by the time I'm getting to these little leafy images, and it was kind of hard to get them to go back behind him because he was pretty secure down there. I really struggled with this purple one, so I just moved it to behind the zebra instead. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that all of the critters looked like they were just like bursting out of the jungle, to wish this person happy birthday. So I wanted all of that foliage to just really be surrounding them on all sides and also behind them. So these purple vines are the last of my leaves. So I'm going to finish with this one here next to the giraffe, and then I'm going to add in my last few little critters. I've got my two red birds that are really going to bring that pop of bright color to the scene. I have one standing on the back of the crocodile, and the other one is going to go kind of standing on the elephant's head right above his ear there. And then I've got my three little butterflies. So I'm going to add the largest one over on the top rightish area, and then a small one over on the left side. And then I wanted to bring that orange down a little further in the scene, and there was that little gap behind the zebra's tail that I thought would be perfect for the last butterfly. I decided not to add any stickles or other embellishment because I felt like this one could really be gender neutral, and even though it was intended for a kid, like I said, I would love to receive a card like this. I think it's totally for adults as well, but you guys let me know. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I post new ones every Monday and Friday. If you're interested in any of the products I used today, you'll find them listed and linked in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye-bye.